Hi, I wanted to make a movie that just talks about animating a bouncing ball. Something that'll just go across the screen and bounce a couple of times on the ground because I think it will show off a couple of Flash's newer features that you might not be aware of, and it also just is a good discussion about motion. So I've just made a new default document in Flash, and I'm going to start by making a symbol. So I'm just going to get out the oval tool here, and I'm going to just let me pick a color first. I can have a bouncing blue ball with a little bit of a red stroke on it. Okay, so I'm going to draw out a ball. Now, I did it the other way, so let me quickly change things. I guess I could have a red ball, but I was kind of set on a blue one, so there we go. Before I start, I'm going to use motion tweens for this, and before I start with that, I need to convert my drawing object into a symbol. Now, Flash will do this for me already if I try to create a motion tween. If I bring this up, notice that it says, hey, do you want to make a symbol? You can go that route, but I always like just going through the process of making the symbol on its own. So with it selected, I'm going to go under Modify and just choose Convert to Symbol, or F8. And when I do that, it asks what kind of symbol you want. So I'm going to have it be a ball, and it's going to be inside the movie clip here. So I guess I'll also set its registration point just to the center of the object here to begin with. We'll see if that has any effect later on. Okay, so now I have a movie clip, and I can tell here that it's a movie clip because I can see the registration point. So I'm going to set this up, and I'm just going to right-click on the keyframe down in the timeline and choose Create Motion Tween. Now at that point, Flash gives me 1 second of time, and I can modify this. I'm going to just extend it out to frame 60 just for the heck of it. Now there's a couple ways that you could go about doing this. Newer CS4 is at least this kind of cool variable motion tween. So if I wanted to start this, I could just drag this out to its endpoint here, and Flash draws this nice little line indicating where the ball is going to travel through space. And every one of these little dots is an indicator of a frame. And by the way, if I take my black arrow, I can click on that line and I can give it an arc if I want, but I'm not going to do that right now. Alright, so I have it flying across. It's not really bouncing at all. So I'm going to first show you the way that you probably don't want to do it, just because I think it's pretty typical that people will try to do this, especially if you've used Flash earlier. So I'm going to advance a little bit in the timeline, let's say frame 15, and I'm going to just drag the ball down to where it gets down towards the ground, and notice that that modifies my timeline, or the motion that it's going in. I'm going to let this bounce up, and it's going to take a little less time going up than before. So let me bring this out a bit, and let's see, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. This is part of the problem with doing this method, is that you are just kind of eyeballing it, and your motion will get kind of screwy. Okay, and now it's going to take a little bit more time or a little less time to come down, so I'll pull this down again. Let's see if we get there. Okay, and we'll advance in time. Here, we'll go back up. And what I'm kind of eyeballing is I kind of want these frames to stay the same, but you can see how difficult it is. These frames are further apart, these frames are close together, these frames are a little further apart, these are close together. It's a little tricky to eyeball this out. I'll have it come down one more time. I'm just going vertically. The horizontal part of it's been taken care of. And then we'll go a little further out. Up a bit. And down. And then maybe one more where it just Okay, cool. So now we've got something that looks pretty terrible. If I press return, this is a good way of testing. If you just press return, it shows it moving along this path. Now, since it's all straight lines, it doesn't look very realistic. Now, nicely, in the old days, before CS4, what I would have students do is go back and maybe like at this point in the frame, we would move this out a little bit so that we'd start to get a fake curve happening. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it straight along here, and I'm going to edit this in just a second. So let me save this right now. I'm going to just save this as jagged. Now, notice that as I've made those movements down in the timeline, keyframes have been added. And one thing that we'll talk about more at another point is this motion editor. Those motions get recorded as little individual keyframes inside of Flash. And look at that it's recording the X and Y motion. We haven't done any skewing or scaling, so those keyframes haven't been made. So when you move stuff around in Flash, it's smart enough to record keyframes only to show you where there's been adjustments. In the motion editor here, you can show more frames. This is a nice little trick just by clicking and dragging. If I drag to the right, notice that I get all the way out here to frame 60. So now I can see all the keyframes that I've got. So here's my X position. And it is funny that the X position got recorded. I suppose if I'd been a little better with my movement, it wouldn't have recorded the X position. I suppose, I don't know if I come in here, let me try something. I have no idea if it'll work. If I remove the keyframe, yep, it removes it for both of those guys. I was wondering if I could get rid of the X and just have the Y. But in any case, here's a description of that motion now inside of this graph editor, which is pretty slick. We'll get more into that later. All right, so what about having this look like it bounces more realistically? Well, I suppose the first thing you can do is you can get out your white arrow here, and you can come in now, and everywhere you've made a keyframe, that path is selectable. Notice that I can click and drag that path. So if I goofed up in places, I don't necessarily have to pick up the ball and go back and put it in there correctly. So I could make some adjustments so that this looked, like it was more passable as a bounce. But more importantly, what I really want to do here is change these paths from straight lines into curves. And I'm going to do that by, in the pen tool, I already have it selected. Your pen tool is let's see, 6 down. I'm going to click and hold on that. If you're used to Illustrator, this tool will seem very similar to you. I'm going to get out the Convert Anchor Point tool. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to just round out these top frames. So I'm just clicking and dragging on that point. And notice I get this little Bezier handle. And I'm going to do that for each of the tops. So basically what I'm doing now, if you're used to older versions of Flash, I'm building a motion path. Flash makes these motion paths for you in CS4 kind of by default. And now I'm just editing that motion path for each one of these guys. Okay, so I have this built. And if I run it back now, it now at least is following this curve. Okay, so it seems a little more realistic. I think one thing that could be agreed upon is that the motion itself, there's not a lot of acceleration. As we look at the object going through space, it's not really accelerating or decelerating. By that I mean at the tops of the curves, we should see dots closer together. And as we get towards the bottom of the curve, the dots should spread out, meaning that as it falls towards the ground, it's accelerating, it hits the ground, and it starts off fast, and then it slows down, and then it speeds up again, hits the ground, and so forth. That is not apparent in this design. Now, there's some ways that you could do this. I could work with some easing and put in easing individually, but easing works from keyframe to keyframe. Now, unfortunately, since I've already put in these keyframes, easing is going to be a little bit tricky. Let me bring this motion editor up, and basically we're going to deal with Y space. So as we come through here, there's some easing that you can choose. If I scroll down to the bottom, I can add some types of easing that there are. So notice that there's a stop and start, fast, slow, all of that kind of stuff. Notice that there's these guys, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But right now, the point I'm trying to make is that it gets a little difficult trying to set acceleration once you've put in all of these keyframes. So what do we do instead? We work, instead of having all these keyframes in here, we put in 2 keyframes, one at the start, one at the end, and we create easing, and the easing will actually make it bounce and drop and accelerate. So let me save this, and I'm going to throw out all the work I just did. I'm going to click on the timeline where the tween is and choose Remove Tween. So now it's all gone. And then I'm going to click on that keyframe, and I'm going to choose Create Motion Tween, and it's back, but notice at this point all the motion has gone. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the ball down over to the right side again, just like we did previously. Alright, now here's the cool trick. I'm going to go bring up my motion editor, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to add an ease. And the one I'm going to choose is Bounce In. And when I do that, I'm going to tell it how many bounces I want. You can add or subtract bounces in here. I'll have it. I think 4 is the default. We can live with that. So that's pretty good. We'll put in 4 here. Now, I've added the ease, but if I look back here, I don't see anything. What I have to do is apply that ease to one of these areas that has keyframes. So again, I'm in the motion editor. The Y channel is my vertical channel. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to choose Bounce In. When I do that, notice that even though I have this straight line indicating the motion, an ease has been dropped in, and the ease actually shows where those frames are. So what happens here is those dots get removed from the path of motion. As I run this, notice that it has, well, first of all, the motion is much more realistic. The cool thing about this is that I can move my timeline around. If I need to compress this, if it needs to do 4 bounces more quickly, I can scrunch it in. Notice that the time now passes more quickly, but it still has the acceleration and deceleration across it. If we look at the individual dots, you'll notice that they're separated as they're going down and going up, and then they get closer together coming up. By the way, if you want to see this visually, there's down at the bottom of the screen here, there's this thing called onion skinning. If I turn that on, it draws a range of frames on either side of where my current frame is. So right now it draws 5 frames. And you'll notice that at the top of any of these curves, they're pretty bunched together. As they get down towards the bottom, they're pretty far apart. So that's a good indicator of having some acceleration and deceleration as it's making its way across. Now, here's the cool thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn off onion skinning, and I'm going to save this. I should have saved the curved one too, but I didn't. Let's save this as bounce. Okay. The other cool thing about this is that since I've made this adjustment, since the timeline still only has 2 keyframes, I can make several adjustments here with the motion. For instance, it'd be nice if it impacted when it hit the ground. You know, the ball would actually squash and then stretch. So what I'm going to do is advance this. And by the way, if we bring up the motion editor, we can kind of see exactly where those motions are. what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple keyframes, and this time I'm going to add them in the scale section. So I'm coming in here, and I'm again in the motion editor. I've scrolled down, looked that there's scale X and scale Y. So I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe, and I'm doing it right before the impact. Why am I doing that? So I have one right on the keyframe before impact, and then one on the impact itself. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to have the ball squash right as it hits, not afterwards. I want it to hit, I'm sorry, I need to learn how to talk. I don't want it to start squishing before it hits. So if I were to not put in a keyframe prior to the impact, the ball would actually start deforming before it makes contact. So the keyframe ahead, I'm putting in a mark for scale X and scale Y, and then the keyframe of impact, I'm adding in keyframes, or the frame of impact, I should say. I'm putting in keyframes. So here's the frame of impact, and I'm going to just go back one keyframe here, one frame, and add keyframes. We'll go out just a little bit more. I think I'm done there. Yeah. So add these keyframes in. Great. So now I've got these keyframes, and we can do this a number of ways. I can either do a transform here, or I kind of like using the editor, the graph editor. What I'm going to do is just click and drag this up a bit, and what it's going to do is it's going to start squashing or horizontally pulling out the ball. Now, to compensate for that, I need to vertically squash it too. So I'm going to take this guy down and drag it down a bit so that it vertically goes down. And I'm going to just do this on each one of these. Notice that since I put in this keyframe, by the time it gets back to this next spot, it's now perfectly round again. So that's the advantage of those keyframes. So I'm going to come in here, and this time I'm going to put in the distortion, but it's not going to be as big. Okay, so it squashes a little bit. And again, one more right on the end. So this is what's really cool. The motion editor is new with CS4, and I can, visually graph out what I want to have happen. Now let's go ahead and close this. Alright, so now it looks more like a rubber ball. As it comes down and makes impact, it actually has a little bit of flexion. And again, remember the rules of animation, squash and stretch. If you squash something along one axis, it should stretch out along the other to compensate for that. It should always kind of maintain a volume. And of course, I could put in a more severe squash and stretch if I wanted that to really take off and look funny. So if I come in here, let's move this up. Let me increase this a bit. The key thing about this is I just want these guys to look similar. So the up and down part should be similar. So I'm going to just make this a little more radically squashed. And notice Flash does this neat little guide thing, so it shows you where the last keyframe was. I'm going to ignore that because I don't want it to be the same size. Okay, so it's a little more exaggerated. Let me just drag that off. And if we look at the animation now, now it's making good, strong impact. And critically, it's not squashing before the point of impact. It's flying through space, and then boom, it hits. And then it recovers, and this recovery is okay. I think the recovery is okay. Then it comes down and then makes another impact. And each impact here is a little less severe because it's not falling so far. It makes one more impact, and then it settles. Okay, so far we have a bounce in here, and we've used that motion successfully. We have acceleration and deceleration. Now, what about rotation? Could we make this rotate? I've experimented with this a bit, and you know, there is rotation on the timeline. You can put rotation in on the timeline, but it tends to make the whole thing look a little funny. Let's try it. What I've done is I've clicked on any keyframe in the motion tween. Notice when I do that, it says motion tween and properties, and there's rotation. I'm going to go ahead and punch in 7 times. Now, we can't really see the rotation yet, but you can see that the bounding box is changing. The problem with this is that it comes down, and notice that it impacts in a really awkward way. It doesn't look like it's hitting the ground anymore. So that's why I don't like setting the rotation in here. So what I'm going to do instead is set this back, and I'm going to edit the movie clip. And I have to tell you, I haven't tested this yet, so I'm going to try something here that I haven't tested, so we'll see if it works. So to edit the movie clip, I'm just going to double click on it. Notice that we're inside the ball movie clip here. And I'm going to first add another element so that we can tell it's rotating. I'm going to just come in and let's see if we can draw out a little highlight. Let's give it a lighter color. No, I don't know. Let's go with, no, that's too wimpy. I'm just going to go with some bright highlight here so we can see that. Okay, so we have this highlight, and I'm going to do another thing. I want this all to rotate inside this movie clip. So I'm going to convert this to a symbol. Again, we're going to have one movie clip inside of another movie clip. So I'm going to go under Modify and Convert to Symbol, and it'll be just a movie clip. Embed ball. Okay. And now that this is a movie clip, I can tell it to rotate. So I'm going to create a motion tween here. And it doesn't have to be terribly long. I mean, we could decide how long it needs to be. That's the neat thing about it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tell it to rotate 5 times. Now notice that it's just kind of running around, and that's too much. So let's rotate this 2 times. Okay, now we can kind of tell that it's rotating, right? Might even be too much for 2, or we could do this. We could extend this out a little bit. So now the rotation happens. Okay, so it's a little slower across that speed. Sorry, that made no sense at all. It takes a longer time for it to rotate. Okay, we've done this inside the ball movie clip. So I come back to the scene. Notice that the little doohickey's in there. But wait, it's not rotating. What's the matter? Well, remember that with movie clips, they're on their own timeline. And if we preview it like this, if I just press return, it only plays frame 1 from what's ever inside the embedded movie clip. But if I test the movie now, let's go in and test the movie. Notice that I get that nice spinning action inside there. It's all getting distorted like it should, and it distorts on the point of impact. So that's an example of why you might want to put one movie clip inside the other. Now, of course, you know, if I need to make an adjustment on the rotation, I have to remember that I need to edit the rotation inside that movie clip. But this is a great way of, anytime you need something like a car wheel rotating, a propeller rotating, do one movie clip inside of the other one, set up just a basic rotation inside the interior movie clip, and then when it's playing on the outside, that rotation just loops. It goes over and over and over again. So piece of cake. If we need that to speed up, we can. The only thing that we're, well, I was going to say that we're even limited in time, but we aren't really even with that. If I decide I want this to be longer, I can stretch it out. All of those frames scale. So that's nice. The only drag about that is notice that I got an in-between frame here. It's actually starting to stretch before the point of impact, which is too bad. But otherwise, it works pretty well. So what I would suggest doing is get your timing right. Figure out how long you want that ball to go. Get that set first. Put in your points of impact. Again, I did that by doing a custom ease. And again, there's two of them in here. It's kind of confusing. If I go back up, notice that it's the bounce in. And again, it's kind of weird. You have to come down to eases. You have to add the ease down here. And then after you add the ease, you can apply it up here. Now there's all kinds of funny eases that you can do. I can add a custom ease as well. If you want to just play around sometime with this, I'll close that up, click on custom. Notice I just get this straight line that goes up. Well, I can come in and right click on any of these things, add keyframes. I can start to goof around with these keyframes. Let's add some more keyframes. There we go. I can start tweaking these around. I want to have just one selected. There we go. So I can pull these around. I can goof around with the Bezier handles. So notice how the handles are playing. If I want to break those handles, so we'd make it something similar to what we saw above, I just get out my Convert Anchor Point tool. I'm in and click and let's see, I want to, oops, sorry. Can I get that to break? I guess I'm holding down Option here. See if, yeah, there. So with Option I can get this thing to break. I can play around with this till the dogs come home. And then once I've got this ease, this custom ease, I can come in and apply that wherever I want. So for instance, I'd come back up here and instead of doing the bounce in, let's choose that custom one and see how it screwed up my animation. So instead of having that bounce, now it's doing something else. It's kind of flying through space, slowing down. Yeah, look at that. That's kind of weird. But you could make a special bounce there if you wanted to. You could do all kinds of things. That basically, the cool thing about this new setup is that you remove the trajectory and the keyframes from one another. You can now have, just one line with your ball in its start and stop positions, and let Flash do all of the middle trajectory stuff. Have it speed up, slow down, all of that stuff. So play around with that. Try to make a bouncing ball. Have it bounce a number of times. Have it impact. If you can do that little rotation as some extra fun, that's cool too. Just get familiar with using eases so that your motion isn't all linear. And by that I just mean it just has kind of a straight velocity. It doesn't accelerate or decelerate. So many things in life accelerate or decelerate. And while you're at it, play around with those other eases. Just remember, you add the ease and then you apply it to whichever channel, for instance, Y position. And there you go. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.